The dusty air in the basement of Julian's Oakhaven home usually held the scent of old wood and forgotten things, a comforting aroma that spoke of history and quiet domesticity. Today, however, it felt heavy, thick with an unspoken premonition. He was wrestling with a leaky copper pipe near the far wall, a task he'd put off for weeks, which necessitated moving an ancient, water-stained chest that had belonged to his grandmother. It was wedged awkwardly behind a stack of rarely used holiday decorations and a defunct exercise bike, a forgotten sentinel guarding an even older, built-in wooden cabinet. As he strained, grunting softly, the chest finally slid, revealing the cabinet door he hadn't noticed in years, slightly ajar. Curiosity, a gentle nudge rather than a forceful pull, led him to investigate. Inside, nestled amongst brittle newspaper clippings from the 1980s and a few tarnished silver trinkets, was a small, ornate wooden box. Its surface was dark mahogany, smooth beneath his fingertips, and it was secured with a delicate, almost whimsical brass latch. He carried it upstairs, his plumber's wrench clanging softly as he set it on the kitchen counter. Eleanor, his wife, was out at her book club, and the children, Leo and Chloe, were engrossed in their evening cartoons in the living room. Julian found a tiny, almost invisible key taped to the underside of the box. A faint click, and the lid lifted with a soft sigh of ancient hinges, revealing a single item, a leather-bound journal. Its cover was a deep forest green, faded at the edges, and the paper within, when he carefully thumbed through it, felt thick and slightly textured, smelling faintly of dried flowers and the passage of time. The handwriting was elegant, looped, and unmistakably Eleanor's. A shiver, cold and sharp, traced its way down Julian's spine. Why would she hide a personal journal? A sense of trespassing warred with an overwhelming, unsettling curiosity. He settled at the kitchen table, the low hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The first few entries were mundane, observations about their early married life, reflections on their burgeoning careers, the anticipation of starting a family. Julian's heart swelled with a nostalgic warmth, a brief respite before the storm. Then the tone shifted. The entries grew more secretive, laced with an unfamiliar tension. Names began to appear, names Julian didn't recognize at first. Then one, Marcus, that resonated with a chilling familiarity. Marcus Thorne, a colleague Eleanor had worked closely with years ago, someone she'd dismissed as merely a work friend whenever Julian had idly mentioned him. The pages started to detail clandestine meetings, stolen moments, whispered confessions of affection. Julian felt the blood drain from his face, his hands trembling as he turned page after page, each exquisite word a hammer blow to the foundation of his world. There were descriptions of intimate dinners, weekends away under the guise of conferences, the exhilaration she felt, the spark she'd found. Dates, specific and damning, aligned with periods Julian remembered as distant, strained, or times when Eleanor had been unusually busy. The journal didn't just hint, it narrated in excruciating detail a full-blown, passionate affair. It wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a sustained, deeply personal deception that spanned years, running parallel to their life together. The world outside the kitchen, the comforting sounds of his children, faded into an indistinct blur as Julian continued to read, lost in the chilling narrative of his wife's meticulously documented double life. The betrayal wasn't merely an act, It was a carefully constructed reality, painstakingly crafted and concealed. He spent the next 3 nights in a state of suspended animation, reading the entire journal from cover to cover. Each evening, after Eleanor returned and the children were asleep, he would retrieve the journal, his movements mechanical, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and despair. He learned the affair with Marcus had started just a year into their marriage, a secret garden Eleanor had cultivated with obsessive care. She wrote of the intoxicating thrill of forbidden love, the emotional connection she felt with Marcus, how he understood her in ways she claimed Julian never could. Julian reread passages, his fingers tracing the elegant script, searching for any sign of remorse, any shred of guilt that acknowledged the man she was sharing her life with, the promises she had made. There was none, only a chilling pragmatism about managing 2 separate existences. The depth of the deception was a bottomless pit, swallowing every cherished memory, every shared laugh, every tender touch, and replacing it with the acid taste of betrayal. Then came the entries that stopped his breath entirely, forcing a guttural gasp from his chest. They spoke of uncertainty, of fear, of a desperate hope that everything would align. Dates surrounding the conception of Leo and then Chloe were detailed with alarming specificity. Eleanor had been with Marcus during her fertile windows, not with Julian. Her journal agonized over the possibility of paternity, her relief when Julian was too trusting to question, her internal struggle to keep the truth buried. "Julian is so good, so kind," one entry read. "He would be devastated. This is for the best, for everyone. I have to protect my secret, protect us." The revelation was a cataclysmic earthquake, not just shaking the foundations of his marriage, but obliterating the very ground he stood on. His children, his beloved Leo and Chloe, the 2 shining stars of his existence, might not be his biological offspring. Every moment of their lives, every bedtime story, every skinned-knee kiss, every proud declaration of "my dad," replayed in his mind, now tainted by this horrifying possibility. Julian's memory became a cruel tormentor, presenting him with a parade of Eleanor's past behaviors. The sudden, unexplained trips, the vague excuses for late nights, her occasional emotional distance that he had attributed to stress or personal challenges. He had always been so understanding, so trusting. Now, these moments were illuminated by a grotesque, neon sign clarity, lies, all of them. He felt like a grotesque parody of a husband and father, a pawn in a cruel, elaborate game. The initial shock gave way to a cold, calculated fury. This wasn't just infidelity, it was a complete fabrication of their shared life, a profound betrayal that extended to the very essence of his identity as a father. He needed proof, irrefutable and absolute. For the next several weeks, Julian moved through his life like a ghost. He took detailed photographs of every relevant journal entry, time-stamped and organized. He transcribed key passages into a secure digital file, cross-referencing dates with their family calendar, his own old diaries, even bank statements for unusual transactions. He maintained a veneer of normalcy for Leo and Chloe, his smile tight, his voice a little too strained, but his love for them, paradoxically, deepened. They were innocent, caught in a web of deceit, not of their making. He would fight for them with every fiber of his being, regardless of the biological truth. The decision to pursue DNA testing was not made lightly. It was a terrifying, necessary step, a plunge into an abyss where he feared what he would find. The thought of confirming his worst fears filled him with dread, but the alternative, living with the gnawing uncertainty, the insidious whispers of doubt, was unbearable. He researched discreet and reputable home DNA test kits, learning the science, the privacy protocols, the accuracy rates. The company he chose emphasized absolute confidentiality, a crucial factor. His heart pounded like a drum against his ribs as he planned the collection of samples. He couldn't ask the children directly. That would be exposing them to the raw, ugly truth far too soon. He waited for moments of innocent carelessness. A strand of Leo's hair caught in his brush one morning after a hurried styling before school. A piece of Chloe's used dental floss discarded on the bathroom counter. Both placed meticulously into separate, sterile envelopes labeled with shaky hands and sealed with trembling fingers. The package was sent, a small, unassuming box containing the potential obliteration of his entire known world. The waiting period was an eternity, each passing day a slow-motion torture. He imagined the samples in a lab, tiny fragments of existence being analyzed, compared, judged. He couldn't eat, could barely sleep, haunted by Eleanor's elegant script and the innocent faces of his children. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, as the Oakhaven sun streamed through his living room window, a notification popped up on his phone, an email from the DNA testing service. The subject line was bland, clinical, but to Julian, it screamed. He clicked it open, his breath hitched in his throat, his vision blurring. The results were stark, unambiguous, and delivered with the cold precision of scientific fact. Probability of paternity, 0%. Not for one child, but for both. Leo and Chloe, the children he had raised, loved, and believed to be his own, shared no biological link to him. The world tilted on its axis. The air left his lungs in a sudden, violent gasp, leaving him hollow. He stumbled to the nearest chair, collapsing onto it, the email still blazing on his phone screen, a cruel oracle of truth. A profound, guttural sob tore from him, raw and unbidden, shaking his entire frame. It wasn't just the betrayal, the infidelity, the lies. It was the theft of his biological legacy, the denial of a fundamental connection he had cherished and believed in with every fiber of his being. He had been a father, fully and completely for years, only to have that reality snatched away, revealed as an elaborate fiction. The grief was overwhelming, an ocean of pain that threatened to drown him. Yet, through the swirling chaos of sorrow and incandescent rage, a different emotion, surprisingly fierce and unyielding, began to solidify. His love for Leo and Chloe. They were still his children. Biology had nothing to do with the lullabies he sang, the scraped knees he kissed, the homework he helped with, the dreams he nurtured. They were innocent, and they deserved his unwavering protection. The DNA reality, while shattering, paradoxically reinforced his commitment to them. It clarified his mission to secure their future, untangle the deceit, and redefine his fatherhood on his own terms. With the DNA results providing undeniable, objective proof, Julian's focus sharpened with a surgical precision. Emotional turmoil still simmered beneath the surface, but a cold, hard determination now governed his actions. He knew he couldn't navigate this treacherous legal landscape alone. He discreetly sought out Mr. Alistair Finch, a highly recommended family law attorney in the neighboring town of Crestwood, known for his formidable reputation and his empathetic yet resolute approach to complex divorce cases. The first meeting in Mr. Finch's tastefully appointed office, with its scent of polished wood and old paper, was a torrent of information. Julian laid out his meticulously organized evidence, the comprehensive photographs of Eleanor's journal entries, time-stamped and cross-referenced, the official DNA test results for both children, a timeline of events that correlated with Eleanor's affair and the children's conceptions, and even some financial records that showed unusual expenditures during the periods of the deception. Mr. Finch, a man with a kind but intensely scrutinizing gaze, listened without interruption, his expression shifting from professional curiosity to profound gravity. He meticulously reviewed each piece of evidence, nodding slowly as Julian detailed the years of emotional manipulation and paternity fraud. "Mr. Caldwell," Finch began, his voice low and steady, "this is an egregious case, one of the most severe instances of marital and paternity fraud I've encountered. We have a very strong position." They discussed the legal ramifications at length. The divorce would be contentious, undoubtedly. Paternity disestablishment for Julian was paramount, not just for legal clarity, but for his own closure. This would, in turn, affect child support obligations, effectively removing any financial responsibility Julian had to Eleanor for children who were not biologically his, and opening the door to pursuing child support from Marcus Thorne, the biological father. Asset division, given the fraud, would also be a crucial battleground, with Julian seeking a settlement that reflected the years of deception and his emotional distress. Julian's unwavering primary objective was clear: securing his relationship with Leo and Chloe. He wasn't abandoning them. He was fighting for the right to remain their father, legally and emotionally, regardless of biology. Mr. Finch assured him that, given the circumstances and Julian's demonstrable history as their dedicated caregiver, the courts would likely prioritize the children's best interests, which included maintaining stability and a strong relationship with the man they knew as their father. They strategized on protecting Julian's financial standing. Under Finch's guidance, Julian quietly opened a separate bank account, redirecting a portion of his direct deposit, and began to scrutinize all joint accounts for any unusual activity. He gathered comprehensive statements, asset inventories, and debt records, preparing for a full financial disclosure. The emotional toll of this covert operation was immense. Julian became a master of artifice, maintaining a placid demeanor at home, engaging in routine family activities, while his mind furiously processed legal strategies, drafted mental timelines, and prepared for the inevitable storm. Every casual conversation with Eleanor felt like a minefield, every shared meal a performance. He was preparing for war, shrouded in the cloak of domestic tranquility. The date for the confrontation was chosen with meticulous care, a Tuesday afternoon after Leo and Chloe were safely deposited at their after-school enrichment programs. The house in Oak Haven felt unnervingly silent, the kind of silence that precedes a cataclysm. Julian had spent hours rehearsing his words, striving for a detached, almost clinical tone that belied the volcano of pain and fury churning within him. He sat at the kitchen table, the journal, now a weapon, laid open before him, flanked by the pristine copies of the DNA results and the comprehensive timeline of deception. Eleanor walked in, her usual cheerful greeting dying on her lips as she saw his grim face and the incriminating documents spread across the table. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of apprehension. "Julian, What's going on? You look serious." He met her gaze, his eyes devoid of the warmth she was accustomed to. "Eleanor," he began, his voice steady, flat. "We need to talk. This isn't a conversation, it's a statement of facts." He pointed to the journal. "I found this, in the basement, the one you hid so carefully." Her eyes widened, a dawning horror stealing over her features. She lunged for the journal, her hand outstretched, but Julian's arm shot out, blocking her. "No, you don't get to hide it again." He turned a specific page, pointing to an entry detailing an illicit weekend with Marcus. "Remember this, Eleanor? 2 years into our marriage, when you told me you were at a work retreat in Providence." He watched her face crumble, the color draining from it. Her carefully constructed facade began to crack. She stammered, "Julian, I can explain. It was a mistake a long time ago. I was confused, lost." Julian merely raised a hand, cutting her off. No explanations, just facts. He then pushed the DNA reports across the table. "And these, for Leo, and for Chloe." He watched, unflinching, as she scanned the documents, her eyes darting from the 0% probability of paternity to his steely gaze. A choked gasp escaped her, and she stumbled back, collapsing onto a chair. Tears welled in her eyes, silent at first, then flowing freely down her cheeks. "Oh my God, Julian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. How did you—" She tried to reach for him, but he recoiled. "How? Because you documented every sordid detail of your betrayal and paternity fraud, Eleanor. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment you deceived me, and worse, every moment you knowingly allowed me to raise children who were not mine, stealing my right to biological fatherhood, to an honest life." She broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands. "I'm so sorry, Julian. I was scared, confused. I didn't know what to do. It just happened. I loved you too, I swear. I was just so lost, and Marcus, he made me feel I didn't want to hurt you or the children." Her pleas were met with Julian's unyielding silence. He felt nothing but a profound emptiness, an utter finality. "Your apologies are meaningless, Eleanor. You didn't just hurt me, you detonated our entire life. There is no coming back from this. Our marriage is over. I've initiated divorce proceedings and my lawyer will be in touch. We will discuss asset division and, more importantly, the legal realities of paternity. I will not be abandoning Leo and Chloe. They are my children, no matter what your deceit tried to prove. I will fight for them with every resource I have. But you and I, we are done." The raw, devastating truth hung in the air, a silent executioner. The aftermath of the confrontation was swift and brutal. Within days, Eleanor, shattered and defiant in equal measure, moved out of the Oakhaven home, taking a small fraction of her belongings and leaving behind the hollow echo of a life built on sand. Julian's lawyer, Mr. Finch, immediately filed the divorce petition, citing irreconcilable differences and, more specifically, the compelling evidence of long-term marital infidelity and paternity fraud. The legal machinery began to grind, a slow, methodical process that felt both agonizingly drawn out and urgently necessary. There were initial court filings, discovery phases, and the inevitable flurry of communication between opposing legal teams. Eleanor's lawyer, clearly blindsided by the depth of Julian's evidence, initially tried to dispute the claims, but the journal, the DNA results, and Julian's meticulously compiled timeline were undeniable. The judge, upon review of the preliminary evidence, ordered mediation, emphasizing the need to protect the children from further distress. Julian's most delicate task, however, was communicating with Leo and Chloe. He sat them down one quiet evening, their bright, inquisitive faces upturned to his, mirroring the confusion in their little hearts. He chose his words carefully, filtering the ugly truth through a lens of love and reassurance. "Mommy and I," he began, his voice soft but firm, "we've decided we can't live together anymore. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and they realize they can't be partners in the same way. But what will never, ever change is how much we both love you. And I will always be your daddy, Leo. Always your daddy, Chloe." He explained simply that their family structure was changing, that mommy would be living somewhere else, but that he would always be there, just as he always had been, for every bedtime story, every school play, every single moment of their lives. He watched their small faces, absorbing their initial tears, their questions, their quiet confusion. He held them close, inhaling the familiar scents of their hair, reaffirming his unwavering presence. The journey towards a new beginning was arduous, fraught with challenges. There were days of profound loneliness for Julian, the quiet house amplifying the ache of betrayal. He sought therapy, a safe space to process the seismic shift in his life, to grieve the loss of his marriage, his perceived biological connection, and the future he thought he had. He focused on rebuilding his life with purpose and intention. He threw himself into his work and, more importantly, into his children's lives. He became even more present, attending every school event, coaching Leo's junior soccer team, helping Chloe with her intricate art projects. They established new routines, creating fresh memories untainted by the past deception. He reassured them constantly, through words and actions, that their father was a steadfast anchor in their turbulent world. Slowly, gradually, the fog of anger and pain began to lift. Julian found unexpected strength in his redefined fatherhood. Biology, he realized, was merely a starting point. Love, commitment, presence, and unwavering support. These were the true hallmarks of being a father. He found a profound sense of peace in the knowledge that he had faced the truth, protected his children, and was building a future based on honesty and genuine connection. The legal proceedings eventually moved towards a settlement, one that favored Julian given the overwhelming evidence of fraud. Eleanor faced significant consequences, both legally and financially. Marcus Thorne was identified and pursued for appropriate child support, a fact Julian took no satisfaction in, but accepted as a necessary step for the children's security. Julian often thought about the basement, the leaking pipe, the hidden box. What began as a mundane chore had led to the unraveling of a monstrous lie and, ultimately, to a profound liberation. He had lost a wife, but he had solidified his identity as a father, stronger and more deeply connected to his children than ever before. The Oakhaven home, once a symbol of his betrayal, was slowly transforming, piece by piece, into a true sanctuary of his new beginning, filled with the authentic love of a father and his beloved children.